Hello, Bridging the Gap family. Andrew Nicastro here, Chief Streamographer at Streamography Studios. But of course, always more importantly, family member to veterans, which is why we are here doing Bridging the Gap to quiet the stigma of PTS and the mental illness that veterans go through. And we do that through stories, education, and relationship building. All of you know Brother Dave.
Hello.
And our sister from another, Mr. V.
Hey.
Other veterans. That's why Andrew put this together for us.
That's right. That's right. And we always have some call to actions. Dave, go ahead and walk us through that.
And we're going to put up a slide. So all veterans or family members, take a picture of this slide. And we're about to show you how you can get some help. We want to first point out the crisis line. Whatever your crisis is, you can dial 988, then press 1. Or you can text 838-255. And you can chat online 24/7 if you're having any struggles with anything within that spectrum of suicide to I want to hurt someone to whatever it is. Please use that crisis line. Also, you got the Gloucester Veteran Services up there, 978-325-5730. And you know we have the director here at the table with us, V, famous V. I like to point out the Veterans of War retreats and the veteran retreats. Welcome Home Initiative. The next one is in Greenwich, New York, June 9th, 10th, and 11th. Then you get Jupiter Beach, Florida, September 24, 25, 26, 27. And then again in New York in November. Again, I am the only veteran. I've said it out loud, and no one's taken me up on the offer. I believe today the person I'm going to talk to could possibly come, and we'll get to that. But again, you can always pause this and take a photo.
Yeah.
All right.
And so I'll get us started here again as far as I have this cool book here with me as far as
What's
service.
that book, Andrew?
It is called Service, Sacrifice, and Salvation. And we are blessed to have the author here with us, Mr. Matthew Fuller.
Hey, Matthew.
Hey, Matthew.
Thank you.
How are you, Matthew? Go ahead and give us a quick little intro of yourself and tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I'm 31. I live in Beverly, Massachusetts.
Oh.
I was an Army Ranger for 6 years from 2012 to 2018. I served as a Special Operations Combat Medic in 1st Ranger Battalion at the 75th Ranger Regiment in Savannah. After I got out of the military, I moved a few different places with my wife. We lived in California for a little bit. I ended up getting my undergraduate degree from UMass Boston, and then I did grad school at Northeastern. And I currently work as a physician assistant in the Boston area. So I've continued in medicine. Before I became a PA, I worked as a paramedic on an ambulance. So I've done a few different things. And now I work full-time in medicine, and I have kind of jumped headfirst into ministry, and I'm trying to get more and more involved with my church and the different things they're doing. So, it's great to be here.
Good for you.
And so start me with the connection, because, I mean, Dave, you're just connected with everybody. I just don't even know how this guy does it.
Wow. A woman 2 years ago went into Community Church of East Gloucester, where I attend, and she was going through a hard time of her life, and we had become friends. We'd been communicating for 2 years. She saw this podcast and saw that we did a podcast and that I'm a veteran of war. And then at the same church he now goes to in Medford, they met, and she says, I think you would like this podcast. He then saw the podcast, and he reached out by, I think you made a comment on the actual podcast on YouTube, right? Does that sound right? And I answered it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
And Janelle, our friend from church, gave me your number, so we
Yes.
connected that way. But yeah, when I started telling people about the book, which I didn't really tell anybody about it when I was writing it, once it was published, I started telling people I have this book.
Yeah.
And so our friend was like, just saw the connection. She's now an elder at our church and just one of the best people I've ever met. And so she connected us. And
This is a good shout out for Janelle, because I was with Matt and his wife Miranda yesterday, and I went to that church and I hung out with them almost all day and got to see her again and connect and a few other people. It's just so cool. The connections.
Very cool.
Yeah, I like connections.
And so you two connect, you hit it off, Janelle makes that connection.
Yeah.
And who brought up the podcast first?
I think Janelle actually mentioned it, and she was like, he has a podcast and he does a bunch with veterans. Like, you guys should just see what you can do together. And so Yeah, I think we got lunch because he had to make sure I wasn't crazy first.
Yeah.
And it didn't even come up. Like the podcast didn't even
Yeah.
come
Wait,
up.
we
'cause-
sent Dave on that mission?
I
Yeah.
know,
Yes, you
right?
did. The craziest of them
I
all.
was just saying.
Right?
Yeah. So, but we had so many other things to talk about.
Yeah.
And it didn't even really come
We
up.
just shared
And then-
testimony the whole time.
Yeah, yeah.
Our
it was really
lives.
powerful.
And even yesterday, we got deeper
Yeah.
into more detailed missions, actually.
Yeah.
When you get us around a table and we start talking, we just
Listen,
get into
I know.
detail.
We just keep going.
And his wife even turned to you and goes, wow, like the detail in our stories. I could even see the awe in her face hearing you and listening to me. It's
Did
just
she know? I'm assuming she would know some of your stories, not all.
Yeah, she knows. She knows everything there is to know. Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
And it just is another example of how just the connections that we form just are so vital in just allowing ourselves to share when it's safe, right? Of course, you have to feel safe doing so. Which that's a journey in itself, which we've explored throughout this
yeah.
podcast, getting to a point where you feel safe doing so. But that's the whole goal,
Yeah.
right? So I guess to start,
well, we've
why
already
don't we-
started.
Yeah, that's true too. We're like
Sorry.
45 minutes in.
Sorry.
He's always doing that.
Yeah.
Giving you a
I
hard
don't
time.
blame him. I do.
I don't.
yeah.
I don't expect.
We're
anything
brothers.
else.
You have
Yeah.
how many brothers you
I have
have?
3 older brothers. Yeah, so I'm the runt of the litter.
Andrew, how about you?
So-
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure my brother Mark said he was surprised there was anything left in the gene pool by the time they got to me.
Yeah,
He's the youngest of 5 brothers.
5
I almost
total.
screwed that up.
I'm so sorry. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
That's a blessing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you
Well,
know.
what
my mom got it right on the last one. That's what she says.
Oh, right.
It's true.
I'm
He's
paraphrasing.
first one to graduate college, successful business.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
concur.
We're working hard here. But I'll tell you, this has been a true blessing as far as this podcast. And so, as far as the book, how long before you actually wrote it did you even have a vision of this coming together?
It's a great question. I actually was gonna speak up and just tell that story, but
Yeah.
a great question. I knew ever since I got out of the military that I had a really great story to tell and that I would eventually write a book. I always knew that. I've been out for 8 years now, and it's a really tough, long transition, and it takes. One thing that people say all the time that has really rung true for me is like the importance of seasons. And so it took a really long time to like become okay with telling the story. And for probably 7 of those 8 years or 6.5, I didn't tell really anybody the things in this book. But I always knew at some point I would write it down. And we were actually hanging out with a bunch of church friends when we were new to our church. And one of the girls, a good friend of ours, said, this was probably 2 years ago, she said, Matt, did anything crazy happen to you while you were in the Army? And I chuckled because everything that happened was crazy. There was nothing that wasn't
Right.
crazy. And so it was probably a group of 8 people. And I said, well, if you'll do me the honor, I'd just tell you my testimony because it was all crazy and I'd love to share with you guys. And none of them were in the military. And so for like 20 minutes, I kind of shared what was in the book. And the book hadn't been written yet. And they were kind of just awestruck. And they were like quiet. It was super quiet. And they were just couldn't look away. And afterward, they were tearful. And like one of them is like trying to get into videography. He's very good. He was like, man, this needs to be a movie. They were like, you need to write a book. And so the idea started to come up again, even though I knew where I would end up. I hadn't taken any steps towards the book, but I now realized that it was a pretty good story. And time went on, and I didn't take any steps towards writing the book. I figured when I was retired, when I was older, and when I had more time, I would write the book. And then I started my job as a physician assistant at MGH in November of 2023, so a year and a half ago. And I did these long 12-hour shifts. And one night, I worked noon to midnight, and I got home. My wife was in bed, and I get in bed with her, and I'm already gonna get emotional. So excuse
All
me.
right. It's all
bring
right.
the
You're in a
tears.
safe
Thank you.
space,
Love
man.
it.
And she wakes up and she said, Matt, the Lord spoke to me and said it's time for you to start writing your book. And so for the next 5 days, I had 5 days off in a row. I wrote for like 10 hours a day for the next 5 days, and I wrote the whole book. And it was like It was like I was just word vomiting.
Wow.
Like our pastor was talking about yesterday, when the Lord speaks to you, you can't miss it. And sometimes you just have to run with it. And you have to sometimes cancel appointments and put off things. And I just knew I couldn't get up from my computer. So literally I had to like force myself to eat because otherwise I would have just kept writing and writing and writing. And so about 90% of the book was written in 5 days.
Wow.
And so come like, you know, the following weeks and months, I had to edit and add and edit and add. And then I spent about 2 or 3 months like kind of getting to know different publishing companies because I knew I needed to partner with someone. And so that took a while because I wanted to go with someone who I trusted, and I didn't know anyone in this space. And I spoke with a leader at my church who had recently published a book, and he had okay experience, and he kind of said, "Hey, really do your homework, you know, because it's a big investment to publish a book." And so I went with this really great company called Christian Faith Publishing, and from November of 23 to November of 24 is when I worked on the book, and November is when I published it, and so it's
November.
been out about six months.
Okay. Oh, wow. That's it.
Wow.
Yep. Yep.
I am honored then to receive one
Yeah,
from you and to
yeah.
read it.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Amen.
Wow.
And so tell us about those 5 days. Were you just in a zone? Were you just like
5 days, yeah.
5 full days of just being wired? Like
Yeah.
like when I'm producing stuff with our technicians, we call it wiring in.
Yeah.
When like my director is wired into a production, like they're supposed to be all in on that. Is that how it felt for you?
Yeah.
Is the
Yeah.
way is
Yeah.
the energy I'm getting?
Yeah, yeah. My wife couldn't even get my attention,
Yep.
and yeah, I was just completely locked in. And I finally I just had so much to tell, so many stories. And over the years, when I was reluctant, and I felt some conviction and some guilt because I didn't share. And people need to hear these stories, and things in church would come up: the importance of testimony sharing, the importance of storytelling. And I kind of felt that nudge, like I needed to get my story out there. And so when I finally just gave in, it just flowed. It just flowed out of me, and I couldn't stop. Yeah.
Andrew, just 1 second. Is there a
Sure.
way to hold up the book again and get
Yeah.
a close up on the book for that camera in the front? Is there a way to get it closer? Jaden, you're the man behind the curtain. Is there a way that you can draw that in?
Zoom in a little.
It says an Army Ranger's story
I got
of
you,
walking
Jade.
with
I
God.
got you.
And then if you see on one side, there's a man holding a weapon. Andrew just lifted a little. And it's an AR, but what we call an M4 in the military. The other side is a civilian, but it's also a military guy, and he's holding a Bible. What's different about all the podcasters we've had on, or the talent, is that Matt can't get away from his faith in God and his military service. When I read the book, it was something I said. I wasn't a believer. I wasn't walking in any way in faith. And even though Matt in his book will tell you where he's struggling, because there is no perfect human, he always brought it back to faith, and I really was drawn to that and loved that you did that. You can't pull it apart. And I love that you've already done that here. You've told us just in your language who you are and what you stand for. And
Yeah.
I just want to say that I'm impressed by that and
Yeah.
what I read in your book.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I admire that you're a younger generation that's putting your story out there. I mean, I've read so many books in the past couple months of a lot of older gentlemen that have finally published their testimony and have given us copies of their book to have in the office. And I'd have to say you're one of the first younger generations that are putting it out there. So I really admire that because you don't see this part of it and you don't hear these stories until after many of these gentlemen have passed. I read an amazing story of a World War II veteran who passed years ago. I would have loved to sat down and spoken with him and kind of just gotten into his head a little
Yeah.
deeper. So
Yeah.
thank you. I admire
Absolutely
that.
agree.
Appreciate it.
And so, as a civilian, I try to bring that perspective, and I don't have to try hard. That
No,
is
you
my
do it
that's
well.
entirely my
You
perspective.
are a civilian.
But so the question from the church members, did you see anything crazy? Right, that question. You know, I always walked on eggshells in my own head, Dave. This is my own thing, where I didn't want to bring that stuff up because I thought it might stir the pot the wrong way. But is it safe for civilians to ask that question, or is there a better way to ask it?
For me, I've always been okay with it because I guess I'm okay with all of the things that I did, even all the horrible things. So yeah, like I think it may be individual, and I think a good way to ask is to just be like, can I ask you about your service?
Absolutely.
Do you
Yeah.
do you mind sharing with me your story? And if not, hey, let's talk about something else.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, so I think it's individual.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thankful for everything that I got to do. Even and you know, I'm not thankful for my sin in the past, but the truth is that it brought me closer to Jesus. So I'll even talk about that openly because it's all done for God's glory. Like all of the mistakes that I've made have brought me back to Jesus. And so no, I'm not thankful for the sin. I may not be thankful for all the horrible things that I've had to do, but it all points to Jesus. So I'm okay to talk about anything. I'll get super deep. Some people maybe having done some mistakes overseas. You know, we make decisions in a split second time, and that decision's not always perfect. And I'm thankful I was never in that situation. And just to be very transparent, I'm talking about like when you end up taking somebody's life who maybe wasn't an enemy combatant. Like that's a really hard thing to kind of forgive yourself for. So that's an example I think of when someone might not be okay talking about it. And so you just say, yeah, can I ask you, do you want to talk about it? And if not, hey, let's talk about something else.
Good question, Andrew. And I just
Yeah.
wanted to
Great
start.
question.
I just wrote down chapters of your book and just wanted to ask questions based on that.
Yeah.
So there was a chapter called Sign Me Up, and we usually start with the early years. You've already given us a brief. So in that point where you were signing up, you had to tell people in your family about your decision. Can you just go into how you told your parents, and you have an older brother I want you to talk about as well.
Yeah.
And can you talk about telling him as well?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's funny. My dad tells this story, and a lot of times people don't really get why it's funny, but yeah, so I'll just tell the story so my brother was signing up to become a Navy SEAL, and he would eventually do that. And so he trained for like probably a year, 18 months, hard so that he could be successful in BUD/S. And this was when I was getting ready to graduate high school. I was a really good swimmer, and I was pretty athletic. And my plan was to go to the University of Maine and continue swimming. And at the time, I was living a very wayward life, right? I was drinking, I was partying, I was having premarital sex, like doing all the things that you shouldn't be doing in high school. And I loved working out with my brother. I loved going to CrossFit, and he was super excited about the Navy. And so it kind of spread to all of us, and we'd watch the documentaries with him and read the books about BUD/S and stuff. And so one day in the winter of 2011 to 2012, I went home after a workout, and I just had a feeling like going to college is just not really going to be the next step for me. I don't do well in school. School costs money when you go to college. I'm already partying and going crazy and making bad decisions, and all that was just going to get amplified if I went to the dorms and stuff like that. And so we had one family computer. Nobody has a smartphone back in 2012. It was a simpler time. And I YouTube searched on our family computer, life as an Army soldier. Started watching these testimonies and kind of stories of these lower enlisted folks and their experience in the military, and I just started crying. I just started bawling my eyes out because I just felt like that was the next step for me. And so the next day I went to an Army recruiting office. I didn't tell anybody, and I signed up, and like I was in, like I hadn't
Wow.
sworn
No
in.
permission, V. He just signed.
I
knew you were feeling
You did
that
it?
as a
You did it too?
mom.
Yeah.
I'm hearing it.
Yeah. So like I was 18, I think, at the time I did this. My birthday's in January, so it lined up. And I hadn't sworn in, but I was doing paperwork and signing paperwork. And I go home that night after hours at the recruiting office. My parents, they didn't really keep an eye on me anymore. I'd be gone for days at a time sometimes, and they would just trust the Lord that I was okay. I was usually partying. They didn't. I'm the youngest of four. Like they couldn't keep an eye on me at all
They were
times.
tired.
They were
tired
tired.
back then. Yeah,
They
yeah.
were very
I know
tired.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
I walk into the living room. I'm like, Mom, Dad, can I talk with you really quick? They're like, what's up? So they pause the news. I said, I'm not going to the University of Maine. I already emailed the swim coach. She won't be expecting me in the fall. And I signed up to join the Army. And they just looked at me with like their jaws on the ground and tears in their eyes. And they were like, yeah, okay, can we talk about that for a minute? And I was like, yeah, but I already signed paperwork. I'm leaving in June or July.
Look at V. She's sweating.
Yeah.
She's sweating.
Yeah. So I talked with David about this yesterday and like what the future looks like for your son. And I said it yesterday, but like, you keep taking him to church, just trust that that foundation is for a reason. Because, like, when life gets hard, he'll have that to lean on. And life got hard for me when I left for basic training. And my parents were terrified, but they just trusted the Lord, and it all worked out.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so then I tell my brothers, right? I have 3 older brothers. They pick on me my whole life. I get all the hand-me-downs. I don't have a voice in the family. And my 2 middle brothers were like, get out of here. Stop. Like, quit playing. You're going to college. You're not a tough guy. Cut it out. My oldest brother was like more serious. He was like, tell me why. Why do you want to join the military? Because he had a very he was 26. I was 18. He had a very thought out plan. He had gone through some hardship, and he was like, I've been trampled on my whole life. I'm about to become the manliest man there's ever been, a Navy SEAL. And that's why, and there was deeper meaning to it than that, but I couldn't really tell him why. Because I felt like it was the Holy Spirit leading me rather than having like a concrete explanation. And so as they'd ask me, why are you joining? I didn't really have a good reason. And I was a little embarrassed because they would try and talk me out of it. Thankfully, they didn't. And come July of 2012, I left Maine and went to South Carolina, started the hardest 6 years of my life. Hopefully it's easier from there.
Right.
But
And so you say the Holy Spirit now, right? That's, I feel like in hindsight, you're saying that.
yeah,
At the moment, though, did you have that faith at that time?
I grew up in church and I knew Jesus my whole life. And as soon as I kind of committed my life to Jesus at a young age, I never really took further steps toward him. I talk about in the book, but I would sit in church at 12 years old and I'd be rehearsing football plays in my head because that afternoon I'd have a football game and I was the quarterback. And my parents would see me looking out the window and they'd whack me in the head. They knew I wasn't paying attention. And that's how I was in high school. Football got replaced by partying. And I didn't really have a deep relationship with Jesus. Thank God he kept helping me out, even though I wasn't really honoring him. But at the time, it was just like a strong feeling. That's all I could really explain it. It was just a strong feeling.
Right.
It's like, college is going to cost you. Let's do this instead.
And so, okay, your brothers are trying to talk you out of it, but that ain't going nowhere because you've already signed papers. So you're already in it. You get deployed. And you said that started the toughest 6 months?
6 years.
6 years, sorry.
Yeah, so I showed up to basic training, and it was July of 2012. We're from New England. It's 70 degrees out right now. It's super warm. It's nothing like South Carolina in
No,
the
it's
summer.
not.
I step off the plane, and I take a deep breath, and I felt like I was breathing underwater because it's so humid. And so that was like the first wake-up call of how rough things were about to get. And so for the next 6 years, it was just wake-up call after wake-up call, and basic training, and then medic school, airborne school, ranger training, and I detail it a lot more in my book. But day one in basic training, I started kind of feeling some fear and angst and anxiety and loneliness. And because of that, I started leaning on the foundation of faith that I had. And that's where really my relationship with Jesus took off. Because as things got harder, I would lean on the foundation and he would deliver. And it was the first time in my life that I would pray and he would deliver. I would pray and he would provide. I would pray and he would comfort. And it was like this relationship of like a father and son, like walking through the park, and your father kind of like carries you over a puddle. And then he walks you away from the snake, and he carries you over the fallen tree. And just like time and time again, just like this caring father just kind of protected and took care of. And that was the beginning of the relationship I have now, and it's just gotten better and better.
Yeah, and then Andrew, with the kind of talking about what it looks like to become a special operations soldier in special forces and what an Army Ranger is, he goes through Army boot camp. After boot camp, what do you do? Tell us the way you become an Army Ranger.
Yeah, so you start as a regular person, and you go through, and your training gets more it gets tapered, and it gets harder and harder at each school you go to. So you go to basic training. A lot of people graduate basic training, right? That's kind of entry level. Then you go to medic school, entry level combat medic training, kind of like an EMT basic on an ambulance. A lot of people graduate that. It's not overly challenging. Then you go to airborne school, which is 3 weeks. You learn how to jump out of airplanes. Also, it's the first step. Everyone in special operations has to go to airborne school. So you're going to be around some people who maybe they're not going to make it, and you're going to be around some really hard dudes. Airborne school is kind of like that first step. Then you go to Ranger selection, 8 weeks. Essentially basic training on steroids. It's the first time that an instructor would address us and say, listen up, men. And I loved that. Day one, we're getting smoked, destroyed in the hot Georgia sun. But they kept saying, listen up, men, listen up, men. And I loved that because I was finally kind of being shown a little bit of respect.
Right.
Before it was trainee, before it was soldier, now it was men. Listen up, men. And so 8 weeks of basic training on steroids, Ranger selection. And you earn your tan beret and your Ranger scroll, okay? You still haven't done anything. You still are like, you're nothing still. Infantrymen at that point go to their unit. They get assigned to 1st Ranger Battalion, 2nd Ranger Battalion, or 3rd Ranger Battalion. And their training is over, and they're now on a line, and they're going to get ready and go to war. My training has just begun. As a medic, I have a lot more to do. So after Ranger training, I go to the Special Operations Combat Medic course called SOCM. It's a 9-month course, and your fellow students are graduated Navy SEALs. They are Green Beret students and Ranger students because everybody goes to SOCM at a different point in their training. And for 9 months, I tried my very best just to survive, and that was truly the hardest training I went through.
A long time, 9 months.
And it's mirrored after physician assistant training, right? So half didactic or classroom, half hands-on. We started with 120 students, and we graduated 20.
Wow.
I was 20 years old. I was one of the youngest to ever graduate. And it was, the Lord showed up time and time again because it literally pushed me. I had no academic success to stand on. This was the first time I knew my legs would not give out on runs, and I knew I could do push-ups. But could I study 8 hours a day in class and 4 hours a day outside of class for 9 months straight? Wow. I had never done that before. And so I just decided, if you're going to be successful in special operations, your mentality has to be die first, then quit. Literally, I will only quit once I'm dead. Because the training you do I had 3 friends I was thinking about on the way here who died in training. Andrew Amesbury, one of the cooks in 1st Ranger Battalion, died on a jump, and there was a 3rd guy. And there are more. 3 guys who die in training. The stuff we do is not safe. So your mentality has to be, I'm going to die, and then I will quit. And only if I'm dead will I quit. And if you have that mentality, you will be successful. And if you don't, you will fail. And so that was how I had to apply my mind to the academics, because that was the hardest thing.
Wow.
After SOCM, I was assigned to 1st Ranger Battalion, which is in Savannah. It's 2015. Show up to my unit. I then go to Ranger School, which is different from Ranger Selection. So Ranger Selection is how you join the 75th Ranger Regiment. Ranger School is a privilege that if you want to get promoted, and if you want to be trusted, and if you want to lead Rangers in war, you have to go to Ranger School and show that. It's really a gut check. Anyone can go, from any branch of the military, any job, even an Army chaplain can go. After Ranger School, I did my 2 deployments, and then I got out. So that's kind of the timeline. 2.5 years of training, 3 years in Savannah, and then I got out in 2018.
And this is all Sign Me Up? This is all that first chapter?
No, that's like he basically gave you
That's like 3
4 or
chapters.
5 chapters.
Yeah.
No, that's okay
Yeah.
because it jumps ahead because I want to talk about when you get through that Ranger school. We have some photos I'd love to come up,
Sure.
talk through
I
that
got
because
you.
they're going to show him in his different deployments.
The Savannah Army Airfield, I
yeah.
was stationed there for a short
Were
time.
you really?
I was.
That's so cool.
I
I knew you
was.
guys would
Best-
connect on some of this.
Yeah.
Best unit. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, Savannah is beautiful.
Yeah.
I think there's nowhere better to
I'll
be
bring
stationed.
these up. Oh.
Here's Goofy Matt.
Why do you call him that?
Well, I'm pretty tall and skinny and goofy, and I'm happy with that. That's just who I am. Big smile on my face. So we were just getting done 4 or 5 days of training some Afghan soldiers in Afghanistan. We were stationed at Bagram Air Base, and we do direct action missions out of there. But we took a break and did 4 or 5 days training in a remote combat outpost, if you will, or FOB. And right now we're getting on that Chinook behind us to head back to Bath. And so I've got my nods and M4, and my buddy took this picture. You can kind of see some dirt on the window. So
Yeah?
he's inside a bus, like one of those old crappy Afghan buses that moved us around base, and we're getting ready to get on that.
And so this is during deployment.
This is in Afghanistan.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll move on here to the next picture.
Yeah, so this jumps ahead to Syria 2017, 9 months later. So we're actually on the front line right now, and I'm kind of getting familiar with the Carl Gustav, the Goose, we would call it. So that's a bazooka, if you will. And we had a little more laxed grooming standards and things going on in Syria. We were paired up with some Tier 1 units as we were on the front lines in Syria fighting ISIS. And so as a medic, I knew my weapon, and I knew the SAW and the 240, but I didn't shoot the Goose all that much. So there's always time for hip pocket training.
Yes.
And so the guys who shot the Goose were like, hey, let's go over, make sure you know how to use the Goose if you need it. Make sure you know how to use all these weapons. And that's one of the most fun parts of deployment. As a medic in Ranger Regiment, you're like a Marine, every Marine a rifleman, right? It doesn't matter if you're a paperwork specialist. You got to know how to take lives if it's needed. So we did a lot of that, and I did a lot of medic training with the guys. And this is me just kind of getting familiar with the Goose. And I looked at my buddy. I said, "Take a picture of me real quick."
We always photos.
You always do that.
He was like, "Man, you're such a loser," but he took a picture, and I'm thankful because I still have the picture.
Well, so as a civilian, was shooting a bazooka awesome?
Oh yeah,
Is it just-
shooting all the guns is awesome.
But there's something about the bazooka,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, oh,
Like,
yeah.
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 My favorite was seeing under nods, seeing helicopters with rockets and miniguns coming down at a really steep angle and lighting up a target that we're about to raid through. There's nothing more American than that. Oh man, best
like
memories.
movies.
Yeah.
All right, moving forward.
This is back to Afghanistan. So I have my good buddy Scott Beckwith on the far right. He was our senior medic. In the middle is my friend Will Greer, who is a junior medic, a platoon medic like me. I'm still good friends with these guys. Will's a great dude. He's about to start medical school in Virginia. Scott's a nurse now. I think Scott did like 8 deployments. Will did 4 deployments.
Yeah, unbelievable.
And I did 2 deployments. So we went down to the air base one day in our trip to Afghanistan just to take some pictures. That's a Chinook behind us, part of the 160th. Probably weren't supposed to post that picture online, but it's all good.
Yeah.
There's so much on social media nowadays.
Yeah, sure
Yeah, I was
is.
just gonna say.
But
There's
those
there's no numbers or anything on
Yeah,
it.
that's a
Yeah.
good
You're
point.
fine.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Moving
The director
forward.
said so, so we're
Yeah.
good.
Sure.
V said so.
This is in Syria in 2017. We were doing some medevac training. So one of the Tier 1 medics said, hey, I need you to grab some of your guys. We're going to go put them on stretchers, and we're going to have the local Army medevac, we're going to train. We're going to call up like casualties. We're going to have them come.
Yep.
So we're outside the wire, but we're pretty safe here.
Yep.
And I cropped out the rest of the dudes, but on the ground we're like Rangers on stretchers with fake
Right.
wounds. We're doing some training.
Can I just point out that, V, you understand this, Matt does, I do. We can be on the front lines, Andrew, and still feel safe that we don't wear bullet bouncers, helmets. We have our guns close by, but we can still look slick and still feel safe because the whole country can be a war zone. Where do you feel safe? It could be anywhere. And you have your guys nearby, and
have
as
a
long as you have your
perimeter.
stuff close by, you're good. So he pointed out already, I'm on the front lines. I was doing training, and he's slick. No gear like that you see that could protect him from but it's close by, and that's kind of something we live in.
But in the back of your head, you still know you're in a war zone. That's got to be that lingering thought,
Yeah,
like.
but you know your enemy and you know where they're going to be coming from.
Yeah.
So the
So
fear,
Is it
for
hard? Is it hard to
civilians.
understand?
The
I cannot
hostile
understand.
say
fear is different because we know where the enemy's going to come from, or we know how they're going to be attacking us. This is all stuff that we're trained prior to us
amazing.
going into country. This is stuff that we learn as we're in country. So he feels comfortable because he knows if they're going to get attacked, he knows the probability of how they're going to get attacked. And then I'm assuming there's got to be a perimeter or something set around you. So there's actually people that are guarding them while they complete their training.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the front lines is a very kind of general term. The front lines could be like,
Could be anywhere. I mean, really,
Sure.
Yeah.
See,
Afghanistan.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
brain doesn't compute.
Yeah.
I just wanted to blow his brain up real quick.
Yeah. I think that the irresponsible and silly thinking
You weren't supposed
pattern.
to say that part.
Yeah.
But it's okay to say it out loud.
I think the kind of like people might look and be like, "Oh, you're just acting like a tough guy," but our mentality really was like,
We're untouchable.
"Yeah, I'm untouchable," but also if you come at me, if we end up passing away, and dude, I mean, there's nothing cooler than being overseas with your buddies, and if you're gonna go out, you're gonna go out looking like a hero. I don't know. That's
Right.
the arrogant, like
Right.
irresponsible thought that we had
Yeah.
as young men, right? So I'll show you some pictures coming up, but when we were hanging mortar rounds literally on the front
Yeah,
line, we'd be
yeah.
slick because I was like, I'm not gonna be in 120-degree heat with body armor on. I feel like I'd rather die comfortable than die uncomfortable, right?
Yeah, and it's coming up. If we want to go to
Yeah.
the next photo and keep talking, yeah, please bring us
Yeah.
through all of it.
So this is Germany. This was a training trip. 1 month we went to Germany. Again, Scott on my left and my buddy Nick on the right. Nick is also a PA in the Boston area.
Oh, wow.
Awesome dude. All of us medics there, and we took a trip to Germany to train with some German soldiers and just to do some practice missions. And again, went down to the airfield for some pictures,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
a photo op. You'll never catch a ranger who doesn't want to take a picture of himself. This is also literally on the front line, a little bit back. We kind of had a staging area we would sleep at for a couple hours in between missions. So we're pretty close to the front line.
This is Syria?
This is Syria.
Okay.
We didn't match on purpose, but I realized after the fact. So that's my platoon sergeant. His name is Roy. This dude was one of those awesome dudes who a little bit lazy in the States. Didn't really care if we got our paperwork in on time. Didn't really care if our profiles were up to date. But when you get him on a battlefield, there's nobody else I'd want to be next to. And we went to
Yeah.
Afghanistan together the year prior. He was my platoon sergeant in Afghanistan. And the medic has to stay in the hip pocket of the platoon sergeant. You do not separate. Because if someone gets hurt and a medic needs to take care of them, the platoon sergeant takes the medic to the patient. The medic sends up the 9-line medevac request
Right.
through the platoon sergeant. So we're like best buds. Like the other E4s and E5s, they can't talk to the E7. But I could, and we were boys.
'Cause you were the medic, yep.
And so that's
Really amazing.
Roy, and he was from 2nd Ranger Battalion. And when he came to do his platoon sergeant time, he came to 1st Ranger Battalion, and he was just an absolute savage. We got in this gunfight in Afghanistan, and smoked these dudes in a car who were trying to pull a fast one on us, but we had this drone overhead letting us know kind of what was around us. And after we got in this pretty legit firefight, somehow one of the enemy was alive, and we were all pulling security, looking one way or another, and one dude popped his head up from a berm, and nobody saw him but Roy. And Roy, standing from probably like 200 meters away, he was a lefty shooter, brought up his M4 and smoked this dude in the face, and
Save lives.
yeah. And that was him. Like, the dude was just always switched on, one of the best combat leaders I've ever known. And in the States, he knew like that paperwork doesn't really matter. When we get in a gunfight,
Right.
I got
It's not
you.
a matter of life and death.
Yeah.
Totally
yeah.
get it.
So he was a
Yep.
really good combat leader. And I love that dude. I hope he hears this, because I've been trying to get in touch with him for a long time.
Okay.
And I've never heard from him. I
Platoon
can't-
Sergeant
We
Roy,
gotta
if
make
you're
that
out there or
happen.
anyone
Yeah.
who sees this,
Roy Whittington.
contact Bridging the Gap. Andrew, this is so long.
Dude, we've talked about
Bridging
this so
the
many
Gap
times.
Vets podcast at gmail.com and contact us.
All the Gmails are taken. I'm telling you.
I've
There's
reached
none
out
left.
to my buddies trying to get his phone number, and I haven't seen him since I got out, but he was a super good dude.
And this
I'd love
photo
to
we've been on a
talk.
little bit, and Matt's going to tell us who this is and what this moment is.
Yeah, so this is Ranger School graduation. I want to say April or March 2016. So I had not yet deployed. This is before both deployments. I had gone through the 9 weeks of Ranger School. Also an extremely high attrition rate, also one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. You know, it's sleep deprivation and food deprivation, and walking through the swamps of Florida and the mountains of Georgia for 9 weeks doing training missions with a heavy rucksack. And I got to graduation, and it's in Columbus, Georgia. I was told that my brothers, no one could make it. No one could make it to my graduation. My brother's a Navy SEAL at the time. I think he had gotten back from one deployment. And none of my brothers could make it. That was okay. My parents would be there. You know, I know life gets in the way of things. And I should have given you the video because I have the video of him surprising me. We get a few minutes before graduation to catch up with family. And he comes up behind me while we're taking pictures. And he's dressed up in his Navy dress uniform with his Navy SEAL trident. And there he was to support me on Ranger School graduation day. So
awesome.
this is him actually pinning my Ranger tab on my left shoulder and giving me a hug. And it's raining, and it's kind of like it's a good video. I have the video too. Yeah. And he said to me, I know this set may sound he's not one to get like emotional or like too philosophical, but he said, I know that this might sound cheesy, but you need to earn this every single day. Your leadership as a Ranger starts now, and you need to earn this. Wow. And as he put it on my shoulder, and I talk about it more in the book, but I always hope that I live up to that.
That's good.
How about this as far as that video? If you upload it to your Instagram, our audience can go and watch the video on your Instagram, right? That way anyone watching can go to, what's your Instagram handle?
MPF818.
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 Good.
Yeah.
And that's where that video will live after this. You can upload it, and people can go watch that video.
That's good.
Yeah,
all right.
good.
Right?
All right, Andrew, next one. Is there more to one you were talking about?
Yeah, this is Syria. We're also on the front line here. This is a 120 millimeter mortar. This is what we did: 4 days on, 4 days off for 4 months, 5 months.
You're sending mortars at ISIS.
Yes.
Andrew, they're sending mortars at ISIS in this photo, completely slick.
Right. Yeah.
That's their mission.
And again, it was just too hot to care about the danger. And actually, it came to bite us. It came up to bite us. But
that's something I'm gonna frame in a little bit after the photos.
Right. Yeah. So this is what we did. This is a 35-pound mortar. We would all put one on, hold it on our shoulder, get in line, and we'd shoot 10 or 12 round mortar missions. And then we'd readjust, and we'd shoot 10 or 12 more mortars. We had an ISR drone overhead that was communicating
like targets,
grid coordinates to us. And between ISIS and us was a Syrian militia called the YPG and the YPJ. They had an all-female unit, door kickers that were females, super cool, and a male unit. And they were fighting ISIS, and we were supporting them with airstrikes and mortars.
Unbelievable.
We also had a casualty collection point where we had medics and surgeons and docs where we would receive casualties. And so I got to do some pretty awesome medical training.
Who was with the ISI drone? Who was controlling that?
We were with some tier 1 guys.
Okay, that's the work with the tier 1 guys?
Right next to us is a striker, and in the striker is a
Andrew,
guy.
what is tier 1?
I have no idea.
So he was asking that question.
5 minutes ago.
So can you tell him what a tier 1...
So people, the military poorly defines the tiers. All we really know is that SEAL Team 6 and Delta Force are tier 1 units. There are others that are less talked about, and they're like the tip of the spear: counterterrorism, hostage rescue, literally like the baddest dudes around that don't exist. Once you go to that unit, Rangers go to the unit, SEALs go to SEAL Team 6. Anyone can sign up and serve in these units, and then they cease to exist. You know, they go dark. They're like the Jason Bournes. You know what I mean? Like they're the tip of the spear. And so they needed some Rangers to do the grunt work while they flew the drones overhead, and they were our bosses.
Yep.
So a bunch of CAG dudes, CAG, Delta Force, this unit in North Carolina, who would, they had unlimited funding and unlimited gear and resources. So we'd have a drone overhead giving us grid coordinates, and they would get converted into... I never gunned, so the guy on my left is gunning, and I'm hanging, and he would coordinate, you know, ticks on a
make the adjustments and
make the adjustments,
right. So to get it right on target.
Accurate.
Yep.
And he would gun, and then we'd have a bunch of dudes hanging rounds, and so he would say hang it, and I would say hanging, and he would say fire, and I would drop it and step aside.
And then there'd be a call for adjustments based on that drone from the Tier 1
Exactly.
units, and that would be done. Awesome.
And a few weeks after this photo was taken, we got blown up, and that dude right there got blown to pieces, and I had to save his life. Yeah.
Okay.
But this was super fun. It was like a CrossFit workout. I mean, imagine picking up a heavy kettlebell all day long, throwing it over your shoulder. That's what it felt like. Go back to the truck, get a mortar, hang it. Go back to the truck, get a mortar, hang it. And we'd have times where there would be a ceasefire. And so we'd get to set up some chairs and a tent, get some shade from the sun, and we just talk like it was a camping trip. We'd share stories and get to know each other.
You just done your shift, and then it's what
man.
we
It's
do.
life,
It's what we do.
though.
Life continues. You got to
We did
talk
the
about
same
something.
thing.
Yeah.
All right, Andrew, go to the next one.
Picture, yeah.
Yeah. This is Afghanistan as well. Backtracking.
He's not that goofy. What do you mean?
That's
He's
a good one.
stud.
That's a
Yeah.
good one. Yeah.
What's at the end of your weapon?
He's like, yeah,
Yeah,
look
so
badass.
my AR, my M4 silencer has a silencer on it. I have a Glock 19 on my hip, and on my weapon is an EOTech and a flashlight and a laser. So we were Gucci'd out with all the best
that's
gear.
all of it.
We had some really, I mean, the night vision goggles on my helmet were $30,000, and it looked like high definition black and white TV. And so I don't know how anybody thought our
And ladies, he is taken, so based on that photo, you'll see very soon.
Yeah.
All right, Andrew,
Yeah.
continue. I know it's coming.
This is probably 2014, right after RASP. So we were still babies. We hadn't gone through SOCM. We hadn't gone through Ranger School. We had gone through Ranger Selection at Fort Benning. On the far left of the picture is Ryan Weishar. Next to him is Chris Carvalho. Then myself, the tall, skinny kid. And then on the far right, John Basnet. Man, these guys have a special place in my heart. We went through RASP together, parts of SOCM, parts of medic training, and I would do anything for these guys. They're like family, even if we don't keep in touch that much anymore.
Yeah.
I think the world of them.
And Matthew's going to send this podcast to all his Ranger buddies,
Yeah.
so they're going to hear this too and continue to send this
Love
to all your
these
buddies.
guys.
Yeah, so they can contact us.
Well, and we've talked about it, how there's something about bleeding green, right? The brotherhood, the sisterhood, the
Right,
camaraderie.
Yeah.
That your brothers and sisters across the way that you serve with. There's something about bleeding green that can never be replaced.
That's right.
Yeah.
No matter how bad or how hard it gets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let me see. Is this the photo?
Again, I was probably like, "Hey, buddy, take a picture of me while I shoot a gun. I want to look cool."
And it's
We
a
would-
souped-out weapon.
Yeah. I mean, we had no shortage of ammo, and like I said, we shoot mortars 4 days on, and then we get 4 days to go back to a semi-safe location, refit the mortar truck, lift some weights, eat some hot food, take a hot shower, and we'd go to the range and just kind of mess around. You know, we weren't training all that hard. We just wanted to shoot our guns and have some fun, and that's the fun part about deployment. You can't do this in the States.
Right.
You gotta have helmet, kit. You gotta have a training plan, a progression of targets you're working through. But overseas, you get to have some fun. You get to actually have some fun. And so we'd go and just kind of shoot our guns, and man.
Andrew, for the next one. Who is this and where are you?
Yeah, this is my best friend.
Yeah.
We've been married 6 years, so it's a good segue. We got married in 2018, and we were living in California at the time. I'll just tell the story briefly. And we were living together, and we were engaged, and we signed up to volunteer at our church. We wanted to serve in the kids ministry and just help out. Churches always need volunteers. We went through this interview process and background checks and all this stuff, and our leaders sat us down at the end of that, and they said, "Hey, you're living together, and you're not married, and we can't support that as a volunteer on our team, because that goes against Scripture." And it was a really tough wake-up call, and it showed me that the Lord will not strike you down with lightning when you sin, but His blessing will not be on you as much when your life is not aligned with His will for you. And this was a good example of that. And it hurt, but what we did was we went home in December. You can tell this picture is not December. In 2018, and we did a small family wedding after we did premarital training, premarital counseling.
Okay.
We got married in December of 2018. It was a small family wedding. We didn't really even tell anybody about it. It wasn't about anything but more closely aligning our lives with God's will. And so it felt like so much freedom once we kind of took that step to live in accordance with the decrees and laws of the Word of God. And so in 2018, we got married, and we've been married now 6 years, but we still wanted a traditional wedding. We still wanted to take vows in front of our friends and have my dad marry us, and her dad walk her down the aisle. So in 2022, I think July
quiz.
2nd, 2022, I want to say.
Miranda will see this,
Yeah,
and
yeah, we're in
yeah.
trouble. We got married at this gorgeous venue in Maine. Same place one of my brothers got married. It's called the Lucerne Inn. It overlooks these lakes in Maine.
Wow, look at that.
And so we did the whole thing. We took vows. You would have thought it was our first. It was really our second wedding. So it was awesome.
Yeah.
And in between the ceremony and dinner, we snuck across the street to Sunset Rock. And we went up there with our photographer and took a couple pictures. And yeah, that's my smoking hot wife. So
Yeah.
Hi, Miranda. I
she's
spent
smoking
all
hot.
day with
Talk
him
about the
yesterday.
Hey,
So
Miranda.
Let's talk about the juxtaposition of the guy that entered the military
yeah,
versus this one in this picture.
yeah,
Huh?
couldn't be more different.
You know?
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's kindness that leads to repentance. So it was a long journey. It was a long journey. I was telling David about this yesterday, but there were a lot of times, I'll tell you, from day one in basic training when the Lord started to provide for me, but I still ran away from him and tried to live for the world. And the way I explain it is like, if you have a child and you put your hand on their head because you love them and you bless them, if your child looks up at you, you still have your hand on their head. And if they turn their back on you and they try and walk away, you still keep your hand on their head. And whether they look up at you with adoring eyes or they turn their back on you, you're there. And that's how it was for me with faith. And as long as I leaned on the Lord and I looked to him, he was happy to have me.
Wow.
And if I tried to run from him, he still took care of me. And so that's really my testimony.
Wow.
And so, yeah, 8 years or so difference between 10 years, from 2012 to 2022. I'm now a leader in my church. And I'm just a completely different person.
Yeah.
And I wanted to touch on, so you said early in your, it was early in your boot camp where that relationship with God started, right? Does that,
Yeah,
and how can you talk about how that relationship grew over the course of your trainings,
Yeah.
becoming a ranger, your deployments? Walk us through that relationship
Yeah.
from when it early till being married.
Yeah. So I think it started out trusting God for little things and that he then provided. And as the things got harder, as life got harder, he showed me I care about these little things just like I care about the big things. And so at first I would pray. There's a story in a chapter called M16s and Cheeseburgers where I prayed for a cheeseburger and he gave it to me. It's ridiculous, I know. And it grew to me just trusting that he would give me the desires of my heart, like his word says. And so later I would pray for much bigger things, like to get me home safe from deployment. And there's a time in the book where he saved, maybe it'll come up, but he saved me from certain disaster.
Yeah.
And it just was like this journey of learning to trust him more and more. And as I did that, I could ask for bigger things more boldly. The word says, "Come boldly before the throne, and ask God for these things, and He will give them to you. He gives you the desires of your heart. And so now I trust Him completely in everything, no matter how big it or hurtful or hard it may seem. It's permeated my marriage and my leadership style at church.
Yeah.
My leadership style in marriage, the things that I want to do with my time outside of work, the way I carry myself in work. I used to have church friends, and now I just have friends, because now everything I do is from a posture of trying to honor God.
Yeah, I wanted to frame this next piece based on everything we're talking about. a lot of what you're saying is in the book. So please, everybody.
I can't wait to read
which
it.
You have
I
a
can't
book.
wait to
Andrew's
read
got one,
it.
but everyone else, please
I have
get this
so many
book.
questions.
This next part is I'm going to make a statement that sometimes men and women feel they have to do their job in combat to actually be put in a position to feel like they get to the next level. And here's the statement that you, Matt, went to Afghanistan as a junior medic and weren't given the opportunity to do your job as a medic. And you came back feeling, he went to combat, Andrew, and had firefights and all this stuff. And still, because he didn't perform at his job as a medic, he said, there's still more. He goes to Syria and something happens where you're put in a situation where now the skills that you were given in all of that training was finally put there in a traumatic situation, and you were able to do that. Is the statement that you went to combat in Afghanistan, there was still something more you were searching for, and then guide us to Syria where it happened?
Yeah, and before I do, I think it's important to say, like, just signing up to join the military is an honorable thing. And if you're a veteran and you never went overseas, or maybe you went overseas and never left the wire, or you went overseas and got in gunfights and whatever the spectrum is, the like I talk about the posture of your heart. To want to serve your country is an incredibly honorable thing. So regardless of what happened on deployment, that's important for you to be proud that you served.
Yes, no matter what.
Yeah, whether you did paperwork, you worked on trucks, or
Everyone's role matters.
Maybe you never
Yeah.
deployed outside of the United States
Yeah.
of America. You had your part.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
agreed.
But yeah, I went to Afghanistan and we did do some really, really dangerous, fun, exciting things. We got in gunfights, and it was awesome. And the Lord used it as a preparatory phase for me. I did not really get to take care of soldiers wounded in combat, which is what I obsessed over, trained for, studied, practiced for years. And I wanted nothing more than for people to look at me in Ranger Regiment and say, he's a tested and tried and good medic. And I didn't really get to do that in Afghanistan. And so we got back from Afghanistan. People liked me. I was successful. I had gotten my Ranger tab. I had been overseas. I'd been in gunfights, but I hadn't really yet scratched that itch. We didn't have a deployment scheduled on the books. We were actually going to stay back while two Ranger companies went forward to, I think, either Iraq or Afghanistan. But because I'm trying to make more margin in my schedule nowadays. But because we had margin in our schedule, when Syria popped off, we were called on, right? So I remember our company commander and company first sergeant taking us up to the mezzanine in the middle of the day, and they were like, "Hey, we weren't going to go to Afghanistan, we weren't going to go to Iraq, but you know what? The government has called on us to go to Syria." And the whole platoon started cheering like we were getting a long weekend or something. Wow. I mean, we were war fighters. We wanted to go to war. What's the point of training, going to the range, doing the trauma lanes, doing this horrific training if you weren't going to go use it? So we kind of got this surprise deployment. And in the summer of 2017, less than a year before we got back from Afghanistan, we went to Syria. And I was dating Miranda at the time. I remember having to call her and tell her, "Hey, I'm actually going back overseas. Hope you're okay with that." She happened to be on speakerphone, and her friend was in the car, and she was like, "Oh, this is awkward." She was shook. And so we went to Syria in 2017, and it was nothing like Afghanistan. It was 1,000 times harder. It was 1,000 times more challenging. We did not have good medevac. We did not have good resupply. We did not have anything kind of laid out. It was very old school. Mm-hmm. And we had to pull our own security. You know what I mean? It was super legit. Mm-hmm. As soon as we got to Syria, one of my buddies, Eddie and Murphy, died in a vehicle rollover, non-combat scenario. His memorial's coming up. I think it was May.
Okay.
He died in a vehicle rollover. I still keep in touch with his mom, and me and Will, we go to the Seaport because he's from Boston, and so his name is on a memorial in Seaport, and so we go there every memorial and pay tribute to him. But So that was kind of like a wake up call. Like it shook us. We were out about to go on a mission when we got news that he had died, and a couple weeks after that, I got news that my dad had a heart attack. My brother actually at the time was in Mosul, Iraq. Same time I was in Syria. He's a Navy SEAL sniper on his second deployment, and they're getting after it. And we get news that my dad had a heart attack. So is it okay if I just go through this story?
Yeah.
So-
This is 7, 8, and 9
yeah.
chapters
so-
in the book.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we're driving out to the front lines. I get this Red Cross message, and I decide I have to make a decision. Do I go home and see my dad, or do I stay with my platoon who's going out on a mission that night? And as a medic, that's a really tough thing because I've trained with these guys for years, and I've been to war with them. And if they get hurt, I need to be there to take care of them. They need to see my face and hear my voice. I felt strongly about that, as every good medic should. And I chose to leave my platoon and go home. And that was a horrible decision to have to make, but I wanted to see my dad in case he didn't make it. Turns out the day I left the front lines, my team went out on a mission and they got blown up. And I was back at a base getting ready to fly to Iraq and then Germany and then the States. And we get news that there were two guys who got hurt, 2 patients. They did have a medic with them. He did a phenomenal job, and those 2 guys lived. But I was like, wow, I went to Afghanistan, and I didn't really take care of anybody medically. And I came to Syria, and I missed my chance. These guys got hurt, and they needed me, and I wasn't there. And that was really the only time in my life I thought about taking my life, because I felt like I had missed my chance. I knew I was getting out of the Army in a couple of months, and this was it. And all this training I had done, and I missed my chance to actually use it. And so I go home and I see my dad, and he does okay. He does fine. Like, he's alive and well today. And I have come to believe that his heart attack and removing me from that mission saved my life. Yeah. And like, why? Why did the Lord save my life that day? And it turns out it was for a much greater purpose. So I go home and see my family. And before I left Syria, my first sergeant said, I don't know if I can get you back here. It's not like you can book a flight to Syria any day. It's a war zone. Thankfully, so I go home and go back to Georgia, and they're like, hey, you're leaving tomorrow for Syria. We got you a flight. And I started praying, God, I don't want to go back. And I'm ashamed to say it, but we have to be vulnerable. I started praying, in some bad weather. I had spent the 4th of July on the beach in Savannah. I had adjusted to the American way of life.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go back to war. And he got me back, so I knew it was his plan. And as soon as I got back, my platoon, welcomed me back with open arms and celebrated me. And I felt really, truly the peace of the Lord. I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be, and that, thank God, he doesn't always give us the desires of our hearts, because sometimes they're not good. Sometimes they're not his plan, and he has better, greater plans for us. So I get back, and it feels good to be back overseas, and it feels good. We're getting after it. We're shooting a lot of mortars, like in the picture, and we're working in the CCP, where we're taking care of patients, guys wounded in the conflict, Syrians, ISIS fighters. We take care of ISIS fighters, just like they're our own. That's what the Geneva Conventions tells us we have to do. We're taking care of kids. It's a really impactful time. A couple weeks before we're supposed to come home, we go out on a mission. It was August 8th, 2017, and we are doing business as usual. We take off our body armor. We're setting in the mortar tubes, like you just saw, to shoot mortars all day. And I'm in a striker on a 50 cal pulling security, making sure we don't get ambushed, because ISIS like to use bulldozers and stuff to go through our courtyards and make entry. And so anything that comes through this courtyard, this gate, I'm lighting up, right? There's 5 guys about 50 meters to my rear, and the ramp is down from the striker, and they're setting in the mortar tubes, and I'm pulling security, and an alarm goes off in the striker. There's a mechanical issue. So I actually leave the position I'm at, And I go get my buddy Jake, and I say, he was the driver, and I say, hey, there's an alarm going off in the striker. Can you come troubleshoot it with me? So we leave the mortar tubes, and we walk back to the striker, and we start figuring out, is it low tire pressure? Is something overheating? What do we need to do? And in that moment, there are 4 Rangers 50 meters behind me sitting in the mortar tubes, and they get bombed.
Exact mortar tube. He was just like,
Yeah.
just want to put that, like the
It was
exact
like
position.
seconds, like probably 30 seconds late, and I would have been there getting blown up. So another way the Lord, like his insane timing, removed me from certain disaster. So we kind of crouched down, and there's this explosion going on behind us. And as soon as like the noise and the bright lights kind of go away, I turn behind me and I look out the ramp of the striker, and I see my 4 buddies, and they're all running from the explosion, kind of in like 4 cardinal directions. And the most badly wounded, the one I was hanging the mortar with in the picture, his name was Mike Bollinger, great guy. He's running towards me. I don't know how. He has a fracture, like an open fib fracture, like bleeding groin, like shrapnel all in his stomach. And he's screaming, medic, 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 which is so funny to me to look back on, because you think when you watch the World War II movies that it's just being dramatized and that it's kind of, well, this is what we think probably happened in the chaos. No, that was super
happened.
legit and super real. They scream medic. And I don't blame them. That's what I would scream. That's what they should scream. But it was kind of funny to me, because I was like, wow, is this really happening? And so he fell at my feet. And for the next 20 minutes or so, I have to kind of take care of Mike and get around to see the other 3 patients. There are only 12 of us out, and a couple Syrians out on mission. So it was technically a mass cal situation. And I take care of Mike, and I get around to see the others. There's just all this heroic stuff going on around me. I remember, like, in slow motion. So it's something really amazing, to give the military and to give the Lord credit. When Mike fell at my feet, he had all these wounds, right? And that's what we trained. That's what we obsessed about. That's what we practiced, this trauma lane, this March algorithm. Massive him, address the bleeding, assess the airway, make sure he can breathe. We trained that night and day, under nods, in the dark, in the daytime. And I did not blank or freeze or freak out. I became a robot. And I just started doing what my hands had done time and time again. And I put on tourniquets, and I stopped his bleeding, and I made sure his airway was good, and I made sure his breathing was good. And then I went to the next guy, and I stopped his bleeding, and again to the next guy, and to the next guy. And it's just a testament to delayed gratification and persistent hard work over time. I started training medicine in the civilian world, and this is a concept that's lost on my colleagues and classmates, that you will reap great benefit if you just do not give up. You do not grow weary in doing good. And if you keep working and practicing and training, whatever it is you're good at, it will come to great fruition in time. And so that day represented to me the product of persistent, consistent hard work over time. And my swim coach, it always makes me think of my swim coach, Philip Emery in Bangor, Maine. He would say there's a bank, and you make deposits. You make deposits of hard work, slowly over time. You can't make a big deposit in one day and withdraw it the next day, because it doesn't have time to appreciate. You make small deposits over time, deposits of hard work. And in one day at the state championship swim meet, you get to make a withdrawal, and it becomes the bank of performance. It's hard work at first, and then it becomes performance. And when you make a withdrawal, you will have a great performance if you put in the hard work over time. And so all that to say, we take care of those 4 guys. My buddy Jordan Hill picked up this 200-pound Ranger on the ground like a clean and jerk. Picked him up by himself, by his leg and arm, threw him on his shoulders, and ran 100 meters to the striker. And that's just one thing I saw that was just
heroic,
insane adrenaline and just heroism and just wanting to take care of your buddy. we get these 4 patients to the CCP, and there's all these Air Force and Army docs, and they start doing surgery on Mike, and they start taking care of the other guys, and they no longer need Matt, the medic. And so I step outside, and it was just this wave of emotion of like anger and pride and thankfulness and hatred and love all at once.
Wow.
I was so thankful that I finally got to use my skills, and I was so glad that I did good. I did well. I talk more about it in the book, some of the things I actually did on target, and I was mad because the enemy actually reached out and got us. And had we been wearing combat gear, maybe Mike would have less injuries to his belly. You know what I mean?
Right.
Go ahead.
Well, so I was going to ask. So, and you probably were going to get to this, but any casualties?
No, so everybody lived.
Everyone
Everybody
lived from
yeah.
that situation?
Yeah, everyone
Yeah.
lived. Yeah, everyone lived. Eddie and Murphy was the only guy to die in Syria from our unit. Everyone lived. The 2 guys that got blown up when I missed that mission, they lived.
From that mission. Yeah.
They lived. The 4 guys, double the patients that I had the honor of taking care of months later, those 4 lived and are all doing great things. 2 are in the military. One's a computer science degree at some Ivy League university in New York, and one's a firefighter. So they're all doing well, and yeah, they all lived. And so, I hand over care to these docs, and I go outside, and I'm just like a wave of emotion, and I'm crying. I step aside, and I start crying, and one of my buddies comes over. He's still in the Army, and he's a believer, and he sits down beside me, and he doesn't say anything at all, and he just puts his arm around me, and just held me for a few minutes until I got it together, and super, super emotional day. Those 4 guys, helicopters come and take them back to a different base in Syria, then to Iraq, then Germany, then Walter Reed, right? Mm-hmm. That day, when they got medevaced, we continued to fight. So we went in, we went to a different location, and we set in mortar tubes, and I wrote with a permanent marker, this one's for the boys, and I put on their 4 names, and I sent the mortar flying. But before that, I was sitting on the truck bed of one of our, what are those Toyota trucks we love to drive around? Hiluxes, greatest truck there's ever been. Yep. And they're not allowed in America for whatever reason, but we love Hiluxes overseas. So I'm sitting on a Hilux with that 1,000-yard stare, and one of the Tier 1 guys came up, and he's like, big beard like yours, missing like 4 fingers. He spent more time overseas than I have alive. And he comes up to me and he hits me on the leg, and he's like, "You all right?" And I was like, "No," but I was like, "I guess." And he goes, "Collect your thoughts. We got work to do." Mm-hmm. And since then, that's just...
Yeah.
It was like you just have to get back on the horse.
Yeah.
You can't stop and like dwell and have a pity party. Mm-hmm. You just got to keep moving forward. Now, it's not always the healthiest thing to do. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you got to process. But when you're in the midst of it, that was a super important moment.
I wanted you to share that story. It's just I just want everyone to know that's one of many stories in here. It's a deep one. I love that you said too that Tier 1 guy came up and said what he said. For me, it was a Tier 1 guy coming up to me, having to check me in and say, "I know that was hard. You got to flip the switch, and we got to get back to work."
Yeah.
Because at war, what do they need but war guys?
Yeah.
And although we struggle in our brain after the fact to put together that circuit board, which can burn out, they need us for a certain time of our life to do things over there.
Yeah.
And if we're falling apart, we can't do it.
Yeah.
That guy got that. When I was over there, I needed to check back in, and I was falling apart because things are hard over there, and at times it happens. But I love that you shared the story that you shared, because that just gives people a taste of this book.
Yeah.
Thanks for being vulnerable.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to like you're doing, Dave, to bring it back to, a civilian hearing these stories, and just one of the many stories in this book, it puts in perspective the things you all go through. Like I feel like as a civilian, we know you go through a lot, but hearing the stories, it's almost like Paul Abney's story. When I hear, if you saw that podcast, dude, it's amazing, the detail.
USS Cole, he was blown up
Oh, wow.
when Al Qaeda had hit the USS Cole in Aden Harbor, Yemen. So just another one of those stories where you're like, like that. Just yeah.
It takes a civilian's breath away, and to
Yeah.
hear you all tell the story gives us a different sense of appreciation. So to V's point, thank you so much for being vulnerable, telling the
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
That's what this is all about.
It
Yeah.
definitely gives us a different perspective, right? Because the different personalities would have had a different response. Many others would have said, "Why me? Why is this happening to me? Why us? Why?" And you kind of just embrace the why, and just become a better version of what you are supposed to be. The
Yeah.
reason why you are there, and that's very admirable. I mean, I got really teary-eyed just listening to that, because I don't know if I would have had the same ideologies that you had while you were there. I don't think I would have said, "Why me?" But I also don't think I would have been
Yeah.
as forthcoming
It's his
as you
faith
were.
because I wasn't a believer as I was walking my journey. That's why I struggled so much with the darkness, post-traumatic stress, and where I went in my head.
Yeah.
I didn't have this peace. That's why I felt this piece was so important to bring in both. I didn't know many men in special operations or the work I did that truly lived out these two men together. And when I say these two men, I mean the book,
Right.
these two men together. They either had one, I got to be honest, I don't know many who had this at all.
Yeah.
No.
You're one of the first.
Yeah.
And I love that you brought up his generation, how young he is. It's to me, it's awe-inspiring.
Yeah.
So
Amen.
I appreciate you allowing me to do life with you and to get to know you and Miranda, and it's going to be more of this.
Yeah. For sure.
And I guess one thing we always like to kind of ask when someone comes in and gives their testimony is, what would you tell 18-year-old Matt Fuller, who you said was tall and goofy, right? Tall and goofy Matt. What would you tell 18-year-old Matt as he's entering the service now with your wisdom and insight?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Probably a lot of things. I wish.
It's a good question. I know. He did this one to me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably a lot of things. I think a few things that went well were that my parents brought me up in the faith. And so I had the foundation. And so I would just say, like, lean more into that. Like, seek the Lord more. And one thing that I'm a little regretful of is even when the Lord was good to me, there were many times that I turned my back on him all throughout those first several years. And I would go to church hungover, and I would go to church, but on Fridays night I'd be at the bar. If I could say one thing, even before 18, you know, like we were saying a little bit before we started the show, I'm not grateful for my sin, but it does bring you closer to Jesus, and I'm thankful for Jesus. If there is one thing that I really wish I had listened to growing up, and this is completely unrelated, really, to the military. I hope this isn't too much to share, but I wish I had listened to people who told me, don't have sex until marriage. And that might sound out of left field. And there is no judgment. Certainly, I'm the chief sinner here. There is no judgment to anybody of any kind who has any sin in their life. But I wish that I had listened to that one thing. All the drinking I've moved away from. All the swear words, the aggression and violence I moved away from. But when you kind of go down that path, you leave a little bit. The word says that you form like a spiritual connection with everybody that you're intimate with. You leave a little bit of your soul tied up with everybody that you've been intimate with. And when you get married, you have less of yourself to give your spouse. And that's a really hard truth to accept, because by the time you realize it, it's too late. You can't go back and undo those things. And there is grace for you, and there's grace for me. But if there was one thing that I really wished I had walked in, it would have been more sexual purity growing up.
I hope my children watch this, and everyone that
know,
is
me
young
too.
in families watch this, because it's true. And I would,
The problem is,
you know,
most,
part of, yeah.
when you're
cultural, yeah.
16 or whatever, you don't want to hear it. You don't
Right.
listen.
Yeah.
And when you realize it, it's too late.
Right.
And there's very few things that are like that. Most things you can reconcile, but you can't go back and change that one thing. So I wish I took that to heart. That's what I would.
Doc, I appreciate you. That's what we call our medics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We love our medics
Yeah.
very much, and we
Doc,
call them Doc. It's a
Docky.
very endearing thing to say. And thank you for coming here and sharing your heart.
Yeah.
And I look forward to continuing to do life with you, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amen. Thanks.
Hopefully
thanks
we
for
can bring you
having
back
man.
on, maybe a year or two
Sure.
from now, and just see how the book is doing,
Yeah.
and just
Yeah.
do a little check-in.
me. Yeah, I'd love
absolutely.
to.
I can't
Thank
wait
you
to read
guys.
this.
Thank you guys for having me.
Just a reminder for everybody that's tuning in, the book, Service, Sacrifice, and
Yes.
Salvation, an Army Ranger story of walking with God. And can people find this on Amazon?
Yeah, if you search the title at Amazon, you'll see the picture. You'll see my name. You can find it in some Barnes and Noble, but Amazon's the easiest way.
Yeah. So on Amazon.com, I'll get the link. I'll put it in the description of our YouTube and all that jazz.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So everyone look for it. And again, reminders of some quick call to action. Friday morning coffees at the Veteran Services office here in
CV.
Cape Ann.
See
Go
us.
CV.
Go CV.
Email Bridging the Gap Vets podcast. If you've got questions for Matt, questions about the book, or questions for any of us,
Yes.
that's always one of the best ways to get it. Otherwise, we look forward to hearing your comments in the posts. We are reading them.
Yep.
In fact, I'm going to do a little debrief with V and Dave on some comments we've gotten from the recent episode.
Sure.
And we love you all. Thank you for tuning
Yes,
in.
love you,
And that's
veterans.
another Bridging the Gap in the books. Thank you.
Thank you.